The world of media and information has changed forever, led by pioneers who depend less on convention and more on timely intelligence and engagement. Peter Schorsch is one of those pioneers, having created one of the most followed news blogs in the business, Florida Politics, that has become a must-read for elected leaders, interest groups, influencers, and increasingly a general public who are less moved by Pulitzers than they are with message howitzers. Schorsch recently sat down for a one-on-one conversation with Ballard Partners Anthony Williams, talking about everything from Mar-a-Lago to the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics, and about how California is still the place to go to dream and dream big. From Ballard Partners Studio in West Hollywood, another special edition of 13th and Park.
We give you information, not a panic attack.
I mean, look what's going on. I mean, my God.
This was it. My kids were gonna die.
That time is gone forever.
This is the biggest story in America.
We weren't prepared for this.
Don't you want to speak truth to power?
Toughest thing I ever had to do.
I am so thrilled to be here with Peter Schorsch, who is the publisher of FloridaPolitics.com. Thrilled to have you here, Peter. Good to see you, man.
Thank you for having me. Fantastic office, fantastic setup. Shout out to Adam Goodman, who has been, I will say it publicly, and I've told him privately, I wanted to be Adam Goodman 25 years ago. I first met him on a film shoot. And me and my consultant boss, we were, basically the Clampets. We showed up, we had a camera. Adam comes, he's got a semi truck. He's got guys unloading it. They got matching shirts. I mean, who am I with here? Spielberg. And he was just so great for a 15-second political television commercial.
Yeah.
And I can see it continues. Adam does, he knows how to, set a quality standard.
Yeah.
So it's great being out here, seeing all of what you guys are doing out in California.
For people out here in LA who don't know you, kind of what's your story? How did you get to be the disruptor of Florida blog politics?
So I was a dime a dozen political consultant like everybody else.
Yeah.
I thought it was all the money in the world, getting paid $6 an hour to write fundraising letters for state legislative candidates. We were good at it. We were a little bit better. We were a boutique level. I saw a little bit of that higher quality, started to take on creative development stuff, rose through that firm and expanded it. I got into, and anybody who can Google sees that I got into an Icarus situation, flew too close to the sun, got in a little bit of trouble, deconstructed my life, went to New York, came, just spent time thinking about what I needed to do to right the things inside of my life. And that's why second chances are so huge for me. Probably why I love California. You can come out here and kind of reinvent yourself. And then I met the love of my life, Michelle, and I started basically a second act, which, they say it doesn't happen in politics, but I think that I'm an embodiment of a second chance, third chance, maybe fourth chance.
Yeah.
And then I would say on the blog and the writing side, it was just really an intersection of purpose and technology. The barrier to entry to journalism, to writing at that point, 2007, 8, 9, was zero.
Yeah.
You could desktop publishing, that concept came about right while I wanted to publish from the desktop.
Yeah.
And I still think this is the origin of what I do. I think that so much of traditional political media really just doesn't capture the in-between of what happens in politics, especially campaigns, especially in lobbying. It's just a sin of omission.
Yeah.
And so I started writing some things that I knew were going on. I think people, said, wait a second, this guy does know it. And then you start building your sources. And then from that, I remember one day I covered a Glenn Beck rally in Central Florida. There were so few people coming into the site, I could see the IP addresses logging on. It was that slow. And now, yada, 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 we probably have 20 to 25 full-time or part-time journalists writing about Florida politics. We are, for 5 years now, through a third-party survey, what lawmakers say they get their most information from. And then I will say, and this is important, there was a Media Matters survey about a year and a half ago, and they rated all of the media sites in the country, high information, low information, partisan, right to left. So just imagine that axis. Florida Politics was in the high information area, which I was happy with, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. But we were the second closest to the center of the graphic determining right and left, Fox being on the right,
Nice.
MSNBC. AP was number one or closest, and
Yeah.
we were right there. So
Yeah.
I feel like I'm providing high value, high information, centrist product.
Yeah.
And with
Yeah.
that, we can take it anywhere. And that's
Yeah.
why, part of the reason why I'm out here in
I
California.
love it. Well, what's so interesting about you really kind of grew up in politics. So you started there, and as you and I were talking about earlier, just about the nature of our business can sometimes, when you read about it, you think it's like a constant knife fight. Like it's like cage fighting. But in reality, we know that people of both parties and all persuasions figure out how to interact and work and do the things that they do. Do you feel like because you came up in politics, that sort of centered you a little bit on kind of where you think you ultimately ended up with on the content?
And I say this in LA, I mean, politics is show business for ugly
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
That's why I can't believe I'm on YouTube right now. But you're right, like 95% of politics is almost regulatory, almost working things out. What drives Tallahassee, and I'm not sure if it's the same in Sacramento or other capitals, but it's these one industry versus another, and the politicians are having to referee it.
Yeah.
And that's what really drives the money and the interests in politics. And then there's this other show pony stuff, crime, education, things
Right.
like that, which drive a lot of the headlines and a lot of the coverage, but they are not what really gets people elected, especially in these very competitive primary races. And so it's just left to, I don't want to say it's familial, but it is like, I feel it is kind of uniparty. It is
Yeah.
like, I don't want to play into that conspiracy.
Right.
I mean, please don't hashtag that. Hashtagging uniparty will put this video on some Reddit channel that I don't want us to be on. But I do feel like it is people of well intentions just disagreeing over, wait a second, I don't think this is how we should regulate a certain segment of the healthcare. And so I think what we do, quite honestly, and like we have the best healthcare reporter in Florida, Christine Sexton. People trust her. They go to her to find out what they just did, like in a lot of ways. I mean, she knows the industry now for 25 years. That is one of our most lucrative silos. People want to advertise and be near that.
Yep.
I see that as what I do, which is identify these coverage silos that are undercovered, whether it be policy-wise or geographic-wise or campaign-wise. You put out a flagpole and say, hey, we're going to write about this. And the advertisers are going to come there. The money is going to come there. That's what's, I think, important whenever we're talking about what I've done, what I would like to do in California is there was no market.
Yeah.
Ballard Partners didn't advertise. They didn't think to advertise. But then they see the value in, like Brian will tell you that I think he told me something like one of the Major League Baseball teams that they represent in Florida, like Googled who is the best lobbyist in Florida. And the stories that are going to come up are, we do the rankings of the lobbying firms. We crunch the numbers on compensation. And so, I mean, if he got one client out of that and all of the partnership that we have together or other firms have together, then it's well worth it. And so, again, just kind of creating a market out of wholesale that wasn't even there before.
Yeah. Yeah. So now you got the combination of kind of somebody who gets politics, and you have that foundation and can write from that perspective and have some really interesting and insightful approaches to some of the stories or some of the things that are happening. But then you go out and you get like these really talented journalists who can work the sources and get the stories and do good writing. Like, what made you think that, okay, at some point I got to get some people who know who are actually trained journalists in here?
Well, and I think it was David Carr at the New York Times. There's a famous interview when he's interviewing, I think, Shane Smith at Vice, and Shane Smith mouths off. And then David Carr says, hey, listen, anytime any of you new media guys get a nickel together, you just go and hire a new reporter. Yeah. And that is truth. That is like, if you look at how Politico came up, et cetera, whenever these companies became bigger, they would attract away established journalists. And now some of the established journalists have actually gone back to the legacy, the New York Times, et cetera, the Washington Post. So that's interesting. Or they've broken out and formed their own things. But I think it was like 2013, 2014, two things happened. Number one, this guy contacted me and said he was going to put the domain floridapolitics.com out on eBay. I was at that point this regional blog, St. Peter's blog. And I went into my wife and I told her, I'm like, we're going to have to drain the bank account. I don't know what this guy wants for it, but this will be game changing. And it was. It ended up costing us tens of thousands of dollars, but anytime you Google Florida politics,
Right.
you're going to go to
That's what's-
floridapolitics.com. And then we hired Christine, and then we hired this gentleman, Bruce Ritchie, who is considered one of the best environmental reporters. And I will tell you, there was a very interesting moment before the start of the 60-day legislative session. We all gathered in Tallahassee. I think I had about 8 or 10 people. And I remember Bruce saying something to me. I was like, well, why don't you do X, Y, or Z? And I don't remember what it was about, but he said, hey, boss, you're better sourced than we are. And in a way, that's probably true. Maybe not on like certain policy specific areas, but I can get into a speaker's office or a governor's office because of the political consulting background, because I speak that language. I understand what they've gone through. There's a level of trust there. And so where the magic really happens is you take their brains, their expertise, the journalist's expertise, and you marry it with kind of my access and my ability to say, hey, listen, this person is going to be fair, probably more fair than you are usually dealing with from traditional media. This is not going to be a gotcha interview. And so you will then have this reporter who maybe had limited access or more formal access to leadership or to even Brian Ballard or something like that, where like, and then like I can connect Brian and say, hey, listen, this is one of my people. You can talk to this person about this bill or about this candidate or about this fundraiser. And you have my word that there's going to be a level of trust there. And that's really where the magic happens.
Yeah. I think I remember reading that you famously broke the FBI raid at Mar-a-Lago. I don't know how you get a scoop like that. You don't have to say, but
I haven't.
You can
But I will say, I'll say 2 things. It wasn't Susie Wiles. There's been a lot of profiles of Susie over the last like 3 months. I know her fairly well and have been quoted a lot. And so people are like, wait a second, this guy's quoted 7 times in this profile about Susie. She had to have been. And I'm like, no, I didn't even speak to her. In fact, I think I probably upset her or upset the timing of what they planned to do. But in that case, that was literally the source was somebody that I knew for 20 years. As the story goes, I talked to that person for like 20 minutes about nothing. They didn't call me, or they called me about that, but they were just calling me. And then at the end of the conversation, oh, by the way, do you know that the FBI just raided Mar-a-Lago? And I'm like, what were we just talked about like your new job for 15 minutes. You're just, and I'm like, and I call a source down there and I'm like, did the FBI just, is it like, yeah, they just left. It was so big. It's like if there's a meteor outside our window right now, you're just like, this can't be happening. Right. And I'm like Google searching to see if this is already out. It was Twitter still then. I'm looking to see this has got to be broken. It's got to be out there. And I was so scared that I was going to screw it up, start a civil war because, Donald Trump had got arrested or whatever, that I called some reporters at the national level that I really trusted. I'm like, hey, I'm going to go with this in 5 minutes. They couldn't believe it. They didn't know. And I'm still upset because Maggie Haberman had been following me for years. She says she didn't know what happened because I called her first and I was going to give her that scoop. But for some reason, she unfollowed me on Twitter. So I wasn't able to like direct messenger. And so I pinged another reporter at the New York Times. And so that was how I found out.
That's pretty amazing, man. So, obviously I've been around the Sacramento world for 30 plus years and
you don't have a wrinkle on you.
Well,
how is that possible?
I don't know. And you know what? One of my best friends from college is a plastic surgeon. We hang out a lot, but not like that. But there's some pretty talented people in and around Sacramento who've done a lot. I know that there's a lot of blogs that people follow. What sort of stands out for you? What you know about like what the coverage is in Sacramento or even like a market like LA or San Francisco?
I'm going to say LA has always been portrayed in mob movies as an open city. Like you could do whatever you wanted in New York and Chicago. If you were family there, there were rules. People could come out to LA. It was open city. You didn't need permission to do anything. And I feel like that is the same attitude about the media here in California. I feel like it's open territory. You can see that Politico has made a conscious decision to kind of de-emphasize Florida and put its resources in California. Like they clearly see a future here. I would just say it's just wide open, especially on the policy level. Again, adding the expertise. Like if I came out, I would not know what to write about who. I wouldn't know who any of the players are. But there is a recipe there. There is a way to scale this up where, we in Florida, the lobbying industry, the state lobbying industry, and this was like maybe a decade ago, I did all the math. And I figured out it was basically they were paying $526 million to all of the lobbying firms per year. So it was $1 billion every 2 years. It's probably 2 or 3 times that. But just finding those metrics out, covering the influence industry, covering who are the important lobbyists. They do it in Georgia. Politico Influence does it in DC. But just covering the influence industry itself could be something that people could be doing. And
not just because somebody did a backyard fundraiser and didn't check the boxes on like the, stuff, and then it becomes a big story. But like really, you're saying like really.
I mean, look at your biography. I mean, it's a gorgeous, sparkling biography. And the only people that see that in a way are,
the price just went up on you.
But I just don't understand why we are not profiling that. And I'm not trying to turn it into Tiger Beat, but and I think it's important for the average reader to know who these people are. They will begin to connect some of the dots rather than, this bill or this law just gets made. How does that happen?
Right.
And I will say one other item, which is I really do think the Olympics, they have like that World's Fair quality where it could be something that could completely change and revitalize LA in a way, and even California, even the United States. I mean, having the Olympics back here, having them in Paris, they're going to be 2 of the largest peacetime gatherings ever. I really think that if somebody were coming out here, just having a silo that dealt with the influence side of the Olympics, they're going to spend $7 billion.
Yeah.
Well, excuse me, that's just their side. So the $7 billion on the Olympic Committee, that's a massive amount of money. How is that being decided? How is that impacting governments? What's going on there? If it's me, I hire a sports writer that understands government and just covers the Olympics. And I'm telling you, people would read that all the time.
Yeah. Here's a need that the city has to make this thing successful. Here's, let's be clear, a client who has a phenomenal freaking product, service, or technology that can match to making that successful. Let me make the introduction so that the conversation can happen. Whether it happens or not is really up to the 2 of them. But I know you, policymaker or decision maker. I know them. Let me match you guys up and see what happens. And that's the beauty of the process, right?
Like, it is. As long, and what we don't want to see is it demonized.
Correct.
Now, we don't want to see it taken advantage of. And if it is taken advantage of, that should be investigated and brought to the public. But we don't need to necessarily see that demonized. And we can also see it as, I think I heard something about like, they're basically going to they have to use the mass transit system. So they're going to, if you buy a pass one time during it, you're going to be able to use the pass for an extended period of time. So it's really going to challenge, am I saying it right? Los Angelins?
Angelinos, yes.
To embrace mass transit in a way that clearly they have not yet. That's an interesting public government experiment that's going to happen in real time. It's going to show us a lot of data. It's going to challenge transportation policy makers to, you better make sure that the things run on time, that literally the trains run on time. Maybe you can shift some of the people to that.
Right.
And that's one, like somebody said, it's 3 Super Bowls a day for 30 days or something like that.
That's wild.
And so it's just, to me, that's just such an interesting, as again, looking for a hook. How would I come out here? Man, I could just start. And you just kind of start with eyes wide open. I know nothing about it. I do know that on July 14th, 2028, the Olympic flame is going to be lit. Let's get to know all the players between now and then and use that as a way to explore all the facets of government, all the intersections that government is going to have with the Olympics. And it would be a way to, again, the LA Times is probably going to listen to this and like, why don't we have an Olympics politics reporter?
And that's fine. That's fine. That's good.
Yeah,
that's how you make it happen. Well, you know what? If you take a run at it, it'd be fun to watch it happen. Love to have you back to talk about how it's going at some point. But it's been good to have you, Peter. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good time.
Appreciate it.
All right.
13th and Park is thrilled to welcome a second home to our family, the state of California, with the opening of our new studio in Hollywood, where we'll continue to share the biggest stories of the day and those behind them. Subscribe today for free to 13th and Park's YouTube channel so you never miss another episode.